Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, about 7 o'clock in the evening. And as you can see, I'm coming to you from the man cave. And it's kind of funny today. This is the third take on this video because I tried to shoot it twice outdoors. And the first time, for some reason or other, I had the camera held wrong, and I cut about half my face off. I don't know how I did that. And the second time, I just didn't like the lighting, and it was a little bit breezy, and there was a little bit too much wind noise. So let's try shooting this again and see what happens. Well, if you saw by the thumbnail, it says the Firefighter Story and shows a picture of another yellow car, and I seem to be getting stuck on yellow cars lately. And speaking of yellow, if you see the yellow on my shirt, I actually got a Bigfoot shirt on. This is not a Bigfoot video. It's going to be a firefighter story and kind of a car story at the same time. But, I went over to Walmart today to pick up some stuff for the spousal unit, and there was a vehicle that you see there in the thumbnail and sitting there, and like a lot of things, it triggered a memory. And if you don't know what one of these things is, I'm going to go ahead and insert that picture again, and I'll do it right here. Those of you that aren't gearheads probably won't know what that is, but that was called a Chevrolet SSR. And SSR stood for Super Sport Roadster. And it was a limited edition vehicle. They only made them from 2003 to 2006. And I'm not sure how many of them they actually made. But they were a kind of a pickup style with a retractable hardtop, which made them an open-air roadster. Well, by golly, when they first came out with those things, I just absolutely fell in love with them. I wanted one of those things in the worst way, and I even actually went, and at one point, I went down and priced one, went looking at one, and the dealer up here didn't have one, so I went down Scottsdale and looked at one, and the one I looked at was red. It wasn't yellow like this one, but at the time, they were pretty hard to come by, and the dealers, they were pretty proud of them, and they were putting a dealer markup on them. This the one I looked at, which I absolutely loved, but it had a dealer markup of about $15,000, and number one, I couldn't afford that, and number two, I wouldn't have paid that anyway, but boy, I sure wanted one of those. But I did get to drive one once, and that's what this story's about. And to tell you the story, let me lay a little backstory. Back in early 2009, I was working for a little fire district just outside of the town I live in, and I was kind of helping them out for a little bit. I worked out there for about a year as a volunteer as a battalion chief. And the fire chief out there was, he and I'd worked together for a lot of years, and kind of started doing it kind of as a favor to him, and I wanted to kind of keep my hand in it, and I wasn't working a paid fire job at the time. But anyway, in those days, the city fire department here operated 2 stations, and what the assignment on a house fire was what we call a first alarm assignment. Was 3 engines, a ladder, a sport utility truck, and 2 battalion chiefs. Well, the town was only running 2. They were running 2 stations, so I had 2 engines, and so for the third engine. On that part of town, our engine would be dispatched along with it. And so our battalion chief, whether it was me or the chief, was working. Well, anyway, make a long story short, we got a fire one day. And it was way out on the eastern boundary, out near where Station 13 is now, but Station 13 hadn't been built yet. So the location was actually closer to our station than it was to the city stations. And so we got dispatched along with them to a report of a house fire. Well, this house was in a pretty exclusive area, gated subdivision of big high-dollar houses on acreage, in a hillside location. And the house that we responded to was set back off the road with a little narrow driveway. And anyway, we got out there, and to describe this house, it was a 1-story ranch with a kind of a rectangular shape. And right in the middle of it was the great room, and it was a huge room with high ceilings. And, the kitchen and dining room and living room and everything all rolled into one. On the far end of the house was the bedrooms and bathrooms. On the near end of the house, where the driveway was, the whole end of the house was garage. It had a 2-car entry door, 2-car wide, 17-foot, standard 17-foot wide or whatever they are, standard door. 7 by 16, I believe they are. Anyway, but once you got inside, there was room enough, probably 5 or 6 cars in the shop area. So it was pretty big garage end. Well, we arrived on the scene before the city units did, and so we took our engine up the driveway, and the fire was in the attic, and it was going pretty good at the time, and of course the people were outside. It was the middle of the afternoon, and since it was in the city's jurisdiction, their battalion chief would be the officer in charge, and so I asked him what he wanted me to do, and he went ahead and assigned me as what they call safety officer. What they usually do is they'll assign a senior officer as a safety officer. Somebody's been around the block a couple times, and our job is to kind of look for safety hazards and try to make sure that none of our firefighters or any civilians or anybody get hurt, and kind of survey what the fire's doing, where it's going. And well, this was set back in heavily treed ponderosa pine area where certain times of the year had been off to the races, but in this particular time of year it was a little bit wetter, so we weren't quite as worried about it spreading into the forest. But so our crew took a line inside and to try to see if we could locate the fire and cut it off. And I made contact with the owner. And the owner was really worried. He had vehicles in his garage, and he was real concerned about it. And he asked if he could go in and get them. And I said, no, it's not a good idea. There's smoke in there. We don't want any civilians in there. And so he asked if there was any way that we could move his cars out of there. Well, I went and took a quick look at it, and I decided, yeah, it was safe to do that. So, but the first vehicle right there by the door was an SSR, same color, identical to this one. Could have been this one for all I know. And that was the one he wanted out of there. It was almost brand new at the time. And that was his pride and joy, and he wanted to get that out of there. So he gave me the keys. Well, there's no way I could go in there and get in that vehicle and move it wearing a breathing apparatus tank on my back. So what I did is an old firefighter trick, and it's not safe, and we don't recommend people do it, but still, it's still done to this day. And I went ahead and took 2 or 3 deep breaths, and went in there holding my breath, opened the car, got in it, started up, backed it out. Backed it across his driveway back into a dirt area up against a hill to get it away from the house. Well, I repeated that 2 more times on 2 other vehicles. Well, and then after that, then I went ahead and resumed what I was doing as safety officer. And it wasn't too long after that, I didn't like the way the roof was looking. And so I called the incident commander, and I told him, I said, I think we need to go defensive on this and pull the crews out of inside, because I think this roof's going to go down. And so he agreed with me and issued the order. And so we went from what we call offensive mode, interior operations. We went to defensive mode, where we fight it from the outside. And the crew inside was my crew. They actually wanted to argue a little bit about it. They said, hey, they're making progress, and they thought they were going to be able to catch it. And I told them, hey, I don't like the way the roof is looking, and command has decided to go defensive on us, so you guys need to get out of there. So they said, okay. So they came out, and we did a head count on everybody, make sure we had everybody accounted for. And it wasn't 2 minutes after that roof over that center section of that house collapsed, taking the garage roof with it. The whole thing went and landed with just a big whump, and that was it. So lost the building, kept it from spreading to anything else, but managed to save that guy's car. So basically the car end of this is I wanted one of those SSRs in the worst way. They were just too darn expensive. They were above my pay grade. And I got to drive one time, and it was in reverse, and it was for about 80 feet backwards. And that was the only time in my life I've ever got to drive one. So, like I say, the one I saw today triggered that story, and I snapped a quick picture of it in the parking lot, and I figured I'd tell you about it. And I think I got it this time. It's nice and quiet here. The wind's not blowing, and lighting is not too bad in here. So I'll tell you as I always do, take care of each other and love each other. And it was actually a pretty nice day today. It was a little warm, and it's supposed to be real warm for the next couple of days. Friday it's going to be pushing 100 degrees here, and it's going to be like 113 in Phoenix or something like that. Just a little bit too hot. We get a little bit of hot weather, but we'll deal with it. It'll be fine. So until I see you again, I guess nothing more to do than to just tell you peace out.